Hello and welcome to Chapter 7 Crisis Intervention. Today, the fun stuff trauma, PTSD, community disasters. A way to uplift your day. Here we go. So, take a look at all these, I guess we'd call them physical health problems. Just take a quick look through. I won't read them. But I want to ask you the question if you have any idea what these have in common, because they all have one thing in common, aside from the fact that it leads to a shortened life. There is a strong relationship between what we call adverse childhood experiences and your chances of having one or more of these in your lifetime. In fact, the research that's out there shows you that the more adverse childhood experiences that you have, the more likely you will have more than one of these health problems. Now, what is an adverse childhood experience? Well, that includes things like physical abuse, neglect, family dysfunction like domestic violence or substance use, parent incarceration, divorce. And this was based off of a large scale study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, and it was based through Kaiser Permanente years ago. I think it was like there were 17,000 people, and they did this review of everyone's medical history and then asked them simple questions about childhood issues. And they really found a strong relationship between the amount of trauma someone went through early on and the number of health problems they would have later in life. In some ways, it makes sense because it's like instead of dealing with the anxiety or depression in one way, sometimes we end up dealing with it in other ways, or both. Like, for example, you may go to therapy to deal with the trauma, but you still may be depressed. You still may smoke. You may even have suicide attempts, right? All those are risk factors that you see in here. We tend to find that folks who have had more of these experiences as they grow up, even the resilient folks, they will have more health problems, leading to a poorer quality of life and a shorter length of life. A little bit about post traumatic stress disorder. Think of it as extreme anxiety. There is a fear, there is a helplessness, there is a wanting to run away or deny. You can have intrusive recollection or flashbacks. In children, what you'll see is repetitive play around the trauma. You'll see physiological reactivity upon exposure to cues. For example, if there was a certain smell in the air at the time of the abuse, maybe dad's cologne or something like that, and down the road, that person smells that cologne, it can certainly trigger the physiological reaction as if they have to be up in arms. There is an avoidance of stimuli associated with the event. This is where we get into this fight or flight stuff, detachment, pessimism, problems with sleep, problems with irritability and anger, problems concentrating, and hypervigilance. Now, it's interesting, when I worked with kids on the south side of Chicago, a lot of them came in with a diagnosis of ADHD. However, if you dig a little deeper and find out about what either their home life or their neighborhood was like, the things that they were witness to directly or indirectly oftentimes led to very similar symptoms. Many times we would end up changing their diagnosis. It doesn't necessarily mean that you change some of the interventions because you do have problems with attention, but you have to look at it through a different lens. Of course, some of the causes are sudden unexpected death of a loved one, witnessing or being part of a car accident, being kidnapped, being robbed at gunpoint, personal or family victimization. And if you think about it, this is not just something that happens in terms of crime. This is something that sometimes other people in power are, in our times, at least in this lifetime, have been engaged in removing children from their families and putting them somewhere else. All these things are sort of traumatic to folks, and as they grow up, can have long-term impacts. And the reason they do is because we know trauma affects the brain. We see changes in the brain as a result of trauma, right? And so what we know is that there are areas of the brain that are impacted, like the amygdala. It gets to a point where it becomes easily triggered, so that fight or flight response is activated very quickly. Or the hippocampus, which is used to store memories. You'll find folks who've been through traumatic events sometimes have really good deal of difficulty retrieving memories. There have been groups working independently at Yale, the VA, and University of California, San Diego that looked at the brain and showed that the hippocampus, the area for memory, is smaller than average on folks who have PTSD versus those who haven't. Now think about that, and I think about that from a child welfare perspective. When you have an underdeveloped brain, you're going to have other problems that go along with it over the course of time. Other things that can cause trauma, natural disasters, which we've been hearing more of lately. So these are things to think about too, because it may not be the thing that you're dealing with as a crisis interventionist may not be because of a family member, but it may be because of the environment around people. So I don't just look at natural disasters, but you got to think about like war-torn areas, like inner city communities, school shootings. There are lots of other things that led to this. Man-made disasters, for example. And here's a list of some of these. So what happens is after one of these man-made disasters, for example, there is sort of a unifying component that happens where there's sort of like strength in numbers and a connection. Of course, then over time that wanes a bit. I mentioned school shootings, and think about, if you have children, think about, and since most people who are listening to this were old enough to remember a time where we did not have school lockdown practices. My kids come home and they talk about, like, it's one of the first things they do in the first week or two is, besides like a fire drill, is they practice an active shooter drill, which I can only imagine for kindergarten through fifth grade in particular is pretty frightening. And maybe even more so for kids who've actually been through a school shooting or a shooting in the community. Some of the interventions, of course, that we use are the community supports that are out there, because the more local you can keep it, the more likely you are to have some success as people have access to these opportunities. There are other things in terms of specific approaches like logotherapy. That's Viktor Frankl, Frankl. If you get a chance to read his book, is it Man's Search for Meaning? I think it's Man's Search for Meaning. It's not it's a pretty quick book. You could probably read it in a day or two. But he talks a little bit about logotherapy and trying to sort of like, it's a little bit like cognitive therapy, trying to make sense of the things that happen to you and the perceptions of the incident around you. The military uses critical incident and debriefing. It's a specific seven phase small group supportive crisis intervention process, and it's just one of a number of crisis intervention techniques which are included under the umbrella of critical incident stress management. Stress debriefing does not constitute any form of psychotherapy, so it's not counseling per se. It's not a substitute for psychotherapy. It's a supportive, crisis-focused discussion of a traumatic event, which is frequently called a critical incident. It was developed for small groups who have encountered a powerful traumatic event, and it aims at reducing distress and restoring group cohesion. Let's talk a little bit about trauma-informed care, because you hear a little bit about this. Trauma-informed care is as you are working with folks, and even if regardless of what sort of the initial complaint is, one of the things that we should always do in terms of our history taking is look at past events and impacts of those past events on people, because there are oftentimes people are struggling with symptoms like depression or anxiety, eating disorders, OCD, other symptoms that don't seem necessarily like trauma off the bat, but as you dig deeper, you find out that it may directly be connected to past trauma. As a result of that, oftentimes our crisis workers will struggle with burnout, sometimes called secondary PTSD, when you're hearing these horrible stories happening to people and you're taking that home with you. It is hard to separate yourself from those feelings. We are encouraging you to empathize with your clients, and so you get closer to the feelings than maybe most who don't see or hear these sort of things. There is this thing that we call, I don't know if I've got it in a future one, but I'm going to talk about it, rational detachment, where you find a way to detach yourself from the client's narrative. And it's not about not caring, but it's more about keeping one's self vital and vitalized. So, some symptoms you might see in yourself, or maybe a colleague: depression or panic. Um, Physical problems, stomach aches are a big one, headaches, backaches, those are all sort of big ones when it comes to burnout. Substance use, when family systems start to fall apart, as well as some cognitive impairments. Causes include conflicts between professionals, conflicts between what you thought you were going to be doing and how you were going to be fixing things and the real experience. Resentment by clients. Your clients, not all of them, will like you. When there are bureaucratic issues, which you have certainly probably run into already, but like accessing care for certain people depending on what their insurance is, getting people on a waiting list, somebody who really needs care and can't get it right away. If you're not getting positive feedback or support from people that work closely with you, as well as if you have not been fully trained or integrated that training, your success is probably not going to be so hot. So, how do you prevent it? You should have some fun with your team members. Business is business, but you should also keep it friendly. Work discussions are helpful. I usually seek out consultation with people who do the same jobs I do to get some consultation, or obviously talking to your supervisor. Social support with friends and family, as well as um, uh, more time in direct contact with clients. I think sometimes I've seen some folks who have dialed back on the amount of time that they've had with clients just to kind of reduce some of the buffer. And it also depends on the clients you get. You may get a couple of clients who are really emotionally, it takes a lot out of you. And it's hard to have a whole caseload of folks who are like that. It does, having a blend of those um, people with different issues is a little bit helpful. There's also secondary traumatic stress. When there is too much exposure to serious illness or crisis states, we may become helpless, and part of that is the big caseloads, the long hours, and the constant stress and trauma that we have to deal with secondarily. Other approaches to treat PTSD are the educational approaches, identifying symptoms, thinking of ways to intervene. I find distraction very helpful when someone's going down the flashback or dissociative route. And for example, one thing that I would have a client do is have lemons in a bag in their fridge, and should they start finding themselves spiraling, to take a big bite out of the lemon. I know it sounds silly, but it's kind of a shock to the system, and it's tactile. You know what I mean? It's one of your senses. So it can be helpful. It can pull you out of it a little bit. Eye movement desensitization reprocessing is an approach that's been used with military veterans, with rape victims and survivors. And there's a lot of research out there about EMDR that seems to be pretty helpful. There is specialized training that goes along with that. Group therapy is very helpful for a sense of universality and feeling connected to others. And in some instances, medication is helpful, um, particularly in the short run. But, as we said, biology changes, so it may be a long term thing as well.